أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين حبيبنا وصفينا أبو القاسم محمد صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم الحمد لأهله والصلاة على أهلها وسلام على من اتبع الهدى. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. We firstly thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the life that He's given us, and also we send salutations and praisings upon our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, the last messenger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the mercy to mankind, the one that came to guide the people till the day of judgment, that every person should have a positive and a perfect life. In the verse of mubahala, when the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam brought Fatima, representing the term our women, representing the term wa nisa'ana wa nisa'akum, all tafsir books of Sunni and Shia agree that daughter of the Prophet, Lady Fatima Az-Zahra Sayyidatun Nisa'i al-Alameen, was the only woman that was in the event of mubahala. Fatima in this verse was representing the term wa nisa'ana against the term wa nisa'akum. This was the woman that the Prophet brought. There's a lot of argumentations by some of the scholars or some of the interpreters of the Quran concerning the presence of Fatima representing wa nisa'ana in the event of mubahala. One of the most crucial statement or argumentation is coming from the scholar by the name of Ibn Taymiyyah. Ibn Taymiyyah agrees the presence of Fatima in the event of mubahala, but he says that there is a possibility if the other daughters of the Prophet, if they were there, there is a possibility that they were going to be present in the event of mubahala. It means that according to him, he says that the verse in this part which says wa nisa'ana wa nisa'akum, it was not only for Fatima, it was for any other daughter of the Prophet. It means that the verse or the term in this verse, it welcomes every other woman that had the potential of being the daughter of the Prophet to be part of the event of mubahala. But when we analyze the situation, when we analyze the statement here, the statement was not about the other daughters of the Prophet. Moreover, there is so much of the argumentations that are there from a lot of prominent scholars that some of the daughters that are considered to be the daughters of the Prophet were not the biological daughters of the Prophet. And also, by that time, when this event was happening, these daughters were not around. These daughters were not alive. That is according to some of the scholars. And the argumentation of Ibn Taymiyyah, it becomes weak and weak and weak. This part of the verse was only for Fatima. Why? Because Fatima was a woman that had the capacity and the capability to be part of the defense of Islam against the Christians of Najran. Some of the people that will ask the question to say, but why would the Prophet bring his daughter representing our women? Why would you do that? It's because maybe he had some emotional attachments with Fatima. Maybe he had some emotional engagements with Fatima. That is the reason why he decided to present Fatima in this event of mubahala. Maybe it is because he was his daughter, so he wanted to have that attachment to his daughter to present the argumentation that was between him and the Christians of Najran. No, logic says no. It's not about that. One of the most important reasons why Fatima was into the event of mubahala was because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted to present Fatima alayha salam to show to the people, to the ummah of Islam, that Fatima is a leader of the women, for which in all both sides of this religion, Sunni and Shia, they accept that Fatima is a leader of the women. But if Fatima is a leader of the women here on earth and also in paradise, why would she not be part of the event of mubahala? Why would she not be there? So when we analyze very well about the argumentation of Ibn Taymiyyah, it is a very weak argumentation. It is an argumentation that does not have any basis. It is an argumentation that provides the starting point of wanting to destroy the household of the Prophet. Because if we see clearly, the people that were in mubahala, these were the Ahlul-bait. These were the people that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also purified in the verse of purification. Another prominent Sunni scholar that had or has a crucial understanding and a crucial argumentation with the presence of Fatima in the event of mubahala or in the verse of mubahala was a scholar by the name of Muhammad Rashid al-Ridha. Muhammad Rashid al-Ridha was a Lebanese-born Sunni scholar who happened to die in Egypt. He was a scholar in Egypt, had a great understanding according to the side of Sunni with theological theories, and he studied the hadith books, and he also had a great impact onto the Sunni side of hadith, and he also studied the Ibn Taymiyyah, and also he studied Al-Ghazali. So he had this great impact on the Sunni theology and ideology. Muhammad Rashid Ridha, for him it is a very crucial understanding, because he completely denies the presence of Fatima in this verse. He completely denies the presence of Fatima into this event of mubahala. According to him, he says that if the term wanisa'ana, which means our women, was ascribing to Fatima alayha salam, it means this is going to be the wrong interpretation of the Quran. Why? Because he says that in Arabic eloquence or in Arabic grammar, there is no way a man would refer to women as our women, especially if that man has got wives. That is what Muhammad Rashid Ridha says. But now if we scrutinize and analyze about the argumentation of Rashid Ridha, it is a very weak argumentation. Why? Because there are so many verses, so many chapters in the Holy Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses this term nisa either for daughters, either for women, either for wives. So many places. What differentiates them is the content and the context of the meaning of the verse. and also the occasion of the revelation of the verse or of the chapter. This is what makes them to be different, and this is what draws our attention. So the argumentation of Muhammad Rashid Ridha is a very weak argumentation. Moreover, if he says that the presence of Fatima in the event of mubahala does not mean the term wa nisa'ana, then he argues the Holy Quran. He argues the presence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala into the mouth of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam. And if he argues the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it means he is disobeying Allah. Why? Because the Prophet is the best interpreter of all the interpreters of the Quran. If the verse was revealed in this way and the Prophet brings Fatima, it means the Prophet best understood what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala meant in this verse. But Muhammad Rashid Ridha, he comes to say that if the verse was ascribed to Fatima, then the interpretation of the Quran is going to be wrong. So does it mean that him, Rashid Ridha, he understands the Quran, he understands the interpretation of the Quran more than the Prophet himself? It means he has gone against the obedience of the Prophet. He does not obey the Prophet. And what kind of Islam do you have when you do not obey the Prophet? When you do not obey the Prophet, it is as good as you do not obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Besides that, Rashid Ridha, he says his words in this way. Then where do we place all these authentic Sunni ahadith that agree with the presence of Fatima in the verse of mubahala or in the event of mubahala? There is so many ahadith, some of which have been presented, some of which have been talked about already in this series, that it was Fatima whom was the woman that the Prophet presented in the event of mubahala. So it means that Rashid Ridha is also going against the authenticity of the Sunni books that clarifies and authenticates the presence of Fatima into the event of mubahala. So many verses that talk about that. So many verses that differentiates this term nisa. For example, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to address the wives of the Prophet concerning the way that Muhammad Rashid Ridha, he gives an interpretation of this verse or this event, denying the presence of Fatima in this verse of mubahala. There's a lot of ahadith which has been mentioned by some of the prominent scholars also from the Sunni side. For example, the narration of Abu Dawood, and also one narration in At-Tilmidh, and also the other narration in An-Nisa'i. It has been narrated that the Prophet mentioned about the fear of his ummah against those people that are going to be interpreting the Quran using their own desires. So it means in this part here, Muhammad Rashid Ridha was using his own interpretation of the Quran, denying the authenticity of the ahadith that have been interpreted since and way back. He wants to deny the presence of Fatima into this verse of mubahala. History tells us, the narrations tells us that the only woman that the Prophet took in this event of mubahala was Fatima. There were a lot of wives of the Prophet that were able to go that side. There were a lot. There were also some other women that were Muslims. They accepted Islam with Iman. They were not only Muslims, but they were mu'minat, meaning that they are believing women. They were not taken to that event. It was only Fatima who goes there. What right does he have to say it was not ascribing to Fatima only? That is wrong. The Prophet mentions a lot about that person who speaks the Quran without knowledge. The Prophet in many of the cases, he would say that whoever speaks or whoever interprets the Quran without knowledge, it will be ruined for him on the day of judgment. On the day of judgment. That is a problem. If he says that the verse was not only for Fatima, but it meant any other women, there's a lot of verses like it has been said, which gives the evidence of the differentiations in the Quran about the women and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala presented the women. For example, in chapter number 2, verse number 49 of the Holy Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, وَإِذْ نَجَّيْنَاكُمْ مِنْ آلِ فِرْعَوْنَ يَسُومُونَكُمْ سُوءَ الْعَذَابِ يُذَبِّحُونَ أَبْنَاءَكُمْ وَيَسْتَحْيُونَ نِسَاءَكُمْ وَفِي ذَلِكُمْ بَلَاءٌ مِّن رَبِّكُمْ عَظِيمٌ. The verse says, and when we delivered you from Pharaoh's clan, who inflicted a terrible torment on you and slaughtered your sons and spared your women. Did you understand this point? He says, slaughtered your sons and spared your women. And in that there was a great test from your Lord. In this verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses the same term, nisa, against sons. It means that he uses the same term, women against sons. But in this case, it did not mean wives, it did not mean women, it did not mean elderly women. In this particular verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he meant daughters. Why? Because Pharaoh was dealing with young ones that time. How? He was killing sons, he was killing boys, he was killing small boys, he was not killing men. And this term nisa, it was used against sons. So it is the term women being used against the term sons. And here logically, and many of the interpreters of the Holy Quran, they mention that it does not mean women in this term. It means daughters. Now we can see the application of the verses of the Holy Quran. Sometimes one term can mean another different aspect of a particular information depending on the occasion of the revelation of that verse. Depending on the sababun nuzul, the reason why that verse was revealed to the Prophet. Depending on the location of the revelation of that verse. So, what right was Muhammad Rashid Ridha had for him to interpret Nisa against Fatima? In that particular verse, Nisa, it meant Fatima. Why? Because that was the only woman who went with the Prophet, whom the Prophet presented to the Christians to do the mubahala with the Christians. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also, he mentions in the other part of the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, إنكم لتأتون الرجال شهوة من دون النساء بل أنتم قوم مسرفون. Indeed, you come to men with desire instead of women. Rather, you are a profligate lot. In this verse of the Holy Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala includes every woman. In this verse, Nisa'a, the word Nisa'a came as a general term. It came as a general word that can include anyone who is a female. In short, in this verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He means any female, because of the occasion of its revelation and also the position and the point at where it was revealed from and to. That is an understanding which we can get logically from the Quran. The Quran is a very important book that we need to pay extra of the attention to understand the particular beings of the Prophet and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Rashid Ridha might claim that this verse did not mean Fatima. This particular word did not mean Fatima, but it meant other women, denying the presence of Fatima. This was only to propagate the denial of the Ahlul-bait, or the presence of the Ahlul-bait in Islam, the importance of the Ahlul-bait in Islam. This was just a way of propagating that people should not pay extra attention to the Ahlul-bait in Islam.
إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما